The next time someone insults you, embarrasses you in front of a group, or tries to get under your skin, you're gonna have 5 responses ready that will make you look calmer, sharper, and more in control than they'll know what to do with. These aren't comebacks. You won't need to be clever, fast, or cruel. In fact, the most common way people try to handle confrontation is the exact thing that makes them look weaker, and later in this video, I'll show you why fighting back with words almost always backfires, even when the words are good. So before we get into it, drop the word control in the comments if you've ever walked away from an argument wishing you'd said something different. Let's fix that. You're in a meeting and someone cuts you off mid-sentence, rephrases your idea as their own, and the room nods along like you never spoke. You're at a family dinner and an uncle makes a comment about your weight, your job, your relationship status, dressed up as a joke, and everyone laughs, including you, because what else are you supposed to do? You're scrolling through your phone at 11 at night, replaying a conversation from 6 hours earlier, drafting the perfect response in your head that you will never actually send. Sound familiar? Maybe it's smaller than any of that. Maybe it's a text message that lands wrong, one line from a friend that reads a little too smug, a little too pointed, and you stare at it for 10 minutes, trying to decide if you're overreacting. Maybe it's your own group chat, the one that used to feel safe, where a joke gets made at your expense and you laugh along in real time because pushing back feels like more trouble than it's worth. Maybe it's your own parent, on the phone, finding a way to slide a comparison into a normal conversation, a sibling's promotion, a cousin's wedding, a neighbor's kid, and you feel that familiar tightening in your chest before you've even registered what just happened. Here's what it costs you. Every time you let a comment sit unanswered because you didn't know what to say, you hand over a small piece of your self-respect. Not dramatically, not all at once, it's a slow leak. You start rehearsing conversations before they happen. You start avoiding certain people, certain topics, certain rooms. You find yourself over-preparing for interactions that used to feel effortless, running simulations in your head of what someone might say and what you'd say back, burning energy on conversations that haven't even happened yet and might never happen at all. Your energy gets spent managing how you might be perceived instead of just living. And the worst part is that it compounds. The version of you that couldn't respond last week is the same version of you that hesitates again next week because you've quietly taught yourself that you're someone who freezes. That belief doesn't stay contained to one relationship or one type of comment, it leaks into how you carry yourself in rooms you haven't even entered yet. Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor who spent his mornings writing notes to himself that we now call meditations, kept coming back to one idea whenever people around him behaved badly. He didn't ask how to defeat them, he asked how to remain undisturbed by them. His logic was simple: other people's rudeness is a fact about them, not a verdict on you, and the moment you let their behavior dictate your emotional state, you've handed them more power over your life than they ever asked for. He wasn't saying ignore bad behavior, he was saying stop treating your peace as something other people get to switch off. That's the whole game. Not winning the exchange, keeping the thing that matters, which is your composure, in your own hands. So here's the core idea, the one thing this entire video is built around. The goal is never to out-argue someone. The goal is to stay so anchored in yourself that their attempt to destabilize you simply doesn't land. That's it. That's the truth underneath every response you're about to learn. Let's be clear about what this does not mean. It doesn't mean staying silent because you're scared. It doesn't mean being a doormat, agreeing with things you don't believe, or swallowing disrespect to keep the peace. Passive isn't the goal here. Unshakable is the goal. There's a massive difference between someone who doesn't respond because they're avoiding conflict and someone who doesn't respond because the comment simply didn't cost them anything. And this is where it gets uncomfortable, because the thing we're trained to do, the modern, socially rewarded move, is the opposite of this. We live in a culture of the comeback, the clapback, the perfect one-liner that goes viral, the reply that ends the conversation, the idea that if someone disrespects you, you're supposed to return fire sharper and faster, so everyone watching knows you won. Every group chat, every comment section, every sitcom has trained you to believe that silence equals loss and a sharp retort equals victory. It's exhausting, it's reactive, and it puts your emotional state directly in someone else's hands, because now your sense of having won depends entirely on how good your comeback was and how the room reacted to it. That's not strength, that's outsourcing your self-worth to an audience. Think about how much of our culture is built around this exact fantasy. The perfect retort delivered at just the right moment, the room going silent, the other person left with nothing to say. It feels good to imagine, but notice something about that fantasy: it requires witnesses. It requires the insult to have worked well enough that your response feels earned. You're not actually imagining freedom from the comment, you're imagining a better performance in response to it. That's a completely different thing, and confusing the two is exactly what keeps people stuck rehearsing arguments they'll never have. What you're about to learn works differently. None of these 5 responses require you to be quick-witted. None of them require an audience to validate you. They work because of what they do to your own nervous system first, and to the other person second. Let's start with the most accessible one, the one you can use starting today in almost any situation. The first response is the pause, not a comeback. A pause held on purpose for longer than feels comfortable. Picture this. You're at work and a colleague makes a snide comment about a project you led, loud enough for 2 other people to hear. The old you would either laugh it off nervously or scramble for a defense. Instead, you just look at them. You don't rush to fill the silence. 1 second, 2, 3. You let it sit there, uncommented on, until the silence itself starts doing work the words never could. Epictetus, who was born into slavery and later became one of the most influential Stoic teachers in Rome, taught his students that nothing outside of you has power unless you assign it power. A rude comment is just noise until you decide in real time whether to react to it. The pause is you making that decision visible. You're not ignoring what was said. You're choosing deliberately not to feed it. Psychologically, this works because of something called the spotlight effect. Our tendency to believe we're being watched and judged far more intensely than we actually are. The person who made the comment is usually banking on you reacting fast, because a fast reaction confirms they landed a hit. When you don't react fast, their spotlight swings back onto them. Suddenly, they're the one standing there, comment hanging in the air, wondering if it came out weirder than they meant it to. You didn't do anything except wait. It's worth understanding why this works on almost everyone, not just people who are especially insecure. Most comments like this are semi-scripted. The person delivering the jab has usually rehearsed it at least loosely and has a rough idea of how the exchange is supposed to go. You flinch or you fire back, and either way the scene resolves the way scenes like this usually resolve. The pause breaks the script. There's no line written for what happens when the other person just doesn't perform their part, and improvising in front of an audience is uncomfortable for almost everyone, including the person who started it. Here's the reframe. Silence isn't the absence of a response. Silence is a response. It says, that didn't move me, and there is no rebuttal to that. None. You can't argue with someone who simply isn't arguing. The action for today is small. Next time someone says something pointed to you, count to 3 in your head before you say anything at all, even if what you eventually say is completely normal. Just build the muscle of not reacting on their timeline. You'll notice something interesting the first few times you try this. It feels almost unbearable. Your body wants to fill the gap. Your mind starts producing panicked little scripts, telling you that the silence is awkward, that you look slow, that you need to say something now. Ignore all of it. That discomfort is just the old habit protesting. It fades fast, usually within a week of practice, and what replaces it is a strange, quiet confidence that has nothing to do with what you actually say. Now, quick gut check before we move to the second one. Have you ever noticed that the people who seem the calmest in tense situations are usually the ones who talk the least? That's not an accident. That's the entire foundation of everything left in this video. The second response escalates a little. Instead of staying silent, you ask a question, not a defensive one. A calm, genuinely curious one that puts the weight of the comment back where it belongs, on the person who made it. Imagine you're at a family gathering and a relative says, still not married? Huh? Must be tough watching everyone else settle down. The instinct is to defend, to explain, to justify your life choices to someone who didn't ask permission to comment on them. Instead, you just tilt your head slightly and ask, what made you want to bring that up right now? That's it. No edge in your voice. Just a question. Watch what happens to the room. A comment like that is designed to land and move on quickly, before anyone has to sit with it too long. It relies on you either laughing along or getting visibly flustered, both of which let the moment pass without anyone examining it. A calm question refuses to let it pass. It slows everything down, and slowness is the last thing a comment like that was built to survive. Seneca wrote to his friend Lucilius about the habit of examining not just what people say, but why they feel compelled to say it. He believed most cruelty, especially the casual kind, comes from people who are uncomfortable in their own lives and looking for somewhere to offload that discomfort. Understanding this doesn't excuse the comment, but it does something more useful than excusing it. It takes away its sting, because you stop experiencing it as information about you and start experiencing it as information about them. There's a psychological concept here worth naming: social comparison theory. The idea that people constantly measure their own standing by comparing themselves to others, often unconsciously. A lot of unsolicited comments about your life, your relationship status, your career, your body, your choices are really just someone processing their own comparison anxiety out loud, using you as the mirror. When you ask calmly why they brought it up, You're gently exposing that mirror instead of stepping into the frame they built for you. The reframe here is simple but powerful. Their comment says nothing about your worth and everything about what's currently occupying their head. That distinction changes how the sting lands. It stops being personal and starts being diagnostic. Your action for this one: the next time you catch a backhanded comment aimed at you, resist the urge to defend your life. Ask one calm question instead, and then actually wait for the answer. Watch how quickly the conversation changes shape. Most people have never once been asked to explain a comment like that out loud, and the request alone tends to catch them off guard. Some will get quiet. Some will actually answer honestly, and you learn something real about what's going on with them. All three outcomes leave you in a stronger position than a defense ever could, because a defense keeps the conversation about you, and this question moves it gently but firmly back to them. The third response is where things get a little uncomfortable, because it asks you to do the opposite of what your ego wants. This one is agreement, not sarcastic agreement. Real disarming agreement with part of what they said. Picture a coworker mocking you in a team chat for asking too many questions during a project. The old instinct is to defend your competence, to prove you're not what they're implying. Instead, you type back something like, "Yeah, I ask a lot of questions. I'd rather get it right than guess and waste everyone's time." No defensiveness, no apology either. Just calm ownership. Read that message again the way the coworker would have to read it. There's no crack to work with. A defensive reply gives them a thread to keep pulling. They can push back, needle further, keep the joke going at your expense. Calm ownership gives them nothing to pull. The joke needed you to flinch, and you didn't. This tactic has a strange kinship with something called the Ben Franklin effect, a well-documented psychological pattern where doing something small for someone, or even simply not resisting their point, tends to soften their opinion of you rather than harden it, because people struggle to maintain hostility towards someone who isn't fighting them. When you agree with the surface-level version of a criticism, you remove the entire argument they were trying to start. There's nothing to push against anymore. Marcus Aurelius had a version of this too. He wrote about not being ashamed to admit flaws or accept fair critique, because a person secure in their own worth doesn't need every statement about them to be flattering in order to stay steady. Confidence, in his mind, wasn't the absence of imperfection. It was the absence of fear about people seeing the imperfection. Here's the part most people get wrong though, and it's worth pausing on. Agreement only works as a power move when it's genuine and specific, not blanket self-deprecation. If you agree with everything, you look insecure. If you agree with one true specific thing, calmly, without flinching, you look like someone with nothing to hide. That's the whole trick. Precision, not surrender. The reframe, owning a real trait about yourself, out loud, before anyone else can weaponize it, takes away their leverage completely. You can't be exposed for something you've already said plainly yourself. Action for today: think of one thing people occasionally criticize you for that's actually just a neutral trait, too detail-oriented, too quiet, too direct, whatever it is. Practice saying it out loud, plainly, like a fact and not a confession. Yeah, I am pretty direct. Say it until it stops feeling like an admission and starts feeling like a description. Say it in the mirror if you have to. Say it to a friend who won't read too much into it. The goal is to strip all the emotional charge out of the sentence, so that by the time someone tries to use it against you, it already sounds like old news, something you settled with yourself a long time ago. If you've made it this far, you already think differently than most people watching this, because most people click off before the halfway point, looking for a quick trick instead of an actual shift in how they operate. You've sat through 3 responses already, and you're still here, which tells me something about how seriously you're taking this. So if this is landing for you, tap like right now. It costs you nothing, and it tells me you want the rest of this, including the part I mentioned at the very beginning. The reason the obvious comeback approach backfires on almost everyone who tries it. That's coming up in a few minutes. For now, let's keep building. The 4th response is harder to fake, because it requires you to actually feel it, not perform it. This is genuine curiosity about the other person's motive, held long enough that it changes the entire emotional temperature of the interaction. Say a friend makes a jab at your career choice at a party in front of people you don't know well. Still doing that, didn't realize people actually made money that way. Everyone half laughs, waiting to see what you'll do. Instead of getting small or getting sharp, you look at them and say genuinely, why does that bother you? Not accusatory, actually curious, like you're trying to solve a small puzzle rather than defend a position. Notice what didn't happen there. You didn't list your accomplishments. You didn't explain your income, your growth plan, your 5-year outlook, none of the things your brain probably wants to reach for in that moment to prove the comment wrong. Proving it wrong still means playing on their terms, still means accepting that your career needed defending in the first place. The question sidesteps the whole trap. It doesn't argue with the premise, it just quietly refuses to accept it. This is close to something Epictetus taught about separating what is up to us from what isn't. Someone else's need to put you down publicly is not something you caused and not something you can control. What you can control is whether you engage with the comment as an attack or as a piece of behavior you're simply observing with interest, almost like a scientist. When you shift into observation mode, you stop supplying the emotional reaction the moment was fishing for. The psychological term worth knowing here is cognitive dissonance, the discomfort people feel when their actions and their self-image don't line up. Most people who insult others in public don't see themselves as bullies. They see themselves as funny or honest or just telling it like it is. When you ask a sincere question about their motive instead of getting defensive, you force a small crack of dissonance into that self-image. They have to either admit they're needling you on purpose, which most people don't want to say out loud, or back off the comment entirely. Either way, you've taken the exchange somewhere they weren't prepared for. Most people never get asked to justify comments like this because most targets either laugh it off or get defensive, and neither response requires the instigator to actually explain themselves. Your sincere question is often the first time they've had to put their motive into words, out loud in front of other people, and that alone tends to be enough to end the pattern for good. Here's the counterintuitive part, and I want you to actually sit with this one. The version of you that can stay curious instead of defensive in that moment is not the calm version by accident. It's the version of you that has already done the internal work of not needing that person's approval. Curiosity is what confidence sounds like when it's not performing. Reframe. Their need to embarrass you says everything about their internal state and nothing about your value, and the moment you get curious instead of hurt, you've already won something they can't take back. Action. Next time someone tries to embarrass you in front of others, resist both silence and sarcasm. Ask sincerely why they said what they said. Then actually listen to the answer instead of preparing your next line while they talk. This is harder than it sounds, because your instinct in a public moment like that is to already be composing your next move before their sentence has even finished. Practice sitting in the discomfort of not knowing what you'll say next. Trust that the curiosity itself, if it's real, will carry you through the exchange better than any prepared line could. The fifth response is the sharpest one, and it's the one most people are the least ready to hear, because it asks you to give up something almost everyone secretly wants in these moments: the win. This is complete emotional withdrawal, not silence as a pause, not silence as a power move, but the full, quiet act of simply not caring enough to engage at all and letting that be visible. This is different from everything before it. The pause still involves them, you're still standing there, still in the exchange, just refusing to react on cue. The question, the agreement, the curiosity, all of them keep you present in the interaction, just on your own terms instead of theirs. The fifth response removes you from the interaction entirely. It's the most advanced move on this list, precisely because it requires you to let go of the need to be seen handling it well. There's no clever line here. There's no moment where the room watches you land a perfect response. There's just you deciding the whole thing isn't worth your attention and living like you mean it. Imagine someone posts something cutting about you online, tagged public, clearly designed to provoke a reaction that other people can watch unfold. Every instinct in you wants to respond, to correct the record, to defend yourself in front of the audience that's now watching. The fifth response is this: you don't. Not out of fear, not out of suppression. You simply decide consciously that this doesn't require your energy, and you go live your day. No subtweet, no vague story post, no delayed just saying comment 3 days later. Nothing. This is close to Marcus Aurelius' most demanding idea, one he returned to constantly because it was hard even for him that other people's opinions of you are ultimately none of your business to manage. He wasn't naive about how much it hurts to be misjudged publicly. He wrote about it because it bothered him too. But his conclusion was always the same: spending your limited time and attention trying to correct how strangers or acquaintances perceive you is a losing game, because you can't control perception, only your own conduct. The psychological concept underneath this is attachment to outcome, closely tied to something researchers describe in the framework of self-determination: the difference between behavior driven by external validation and behavior driven by internal values. When your peace depends on winning the public perception battle, you've made your emotional stability conditional on strangers. When your peace comes from your own sense of who you are, nothing they post changes that. This isn't about suppressing hurt, it's about not needing an audience to resolve it for you. There's a strange kind of freedom in accepting that some people will simply be wrong about you permanently, and that you can live a completely full life without ever correcting the record. Most of us were never taught that this is allowed. We were taught that misperception is an emergency, something to fix immediately, and that letting it stand is a kind of failure. It's just a boundary, a decision about where your attention actually belongs. Reframe. Not responding to a public attack isn't losing the argument. It removes the argument entirely, because an argument requires two people showing up, and you didn't show up. Action. Pick one thing this week that would normally provoke a response from you online or in person and practice the physical act of closing the app, turning away, changing the subject without narrating to yourself that you're being the bigger person. Just do it and notice how quiet your mind gets afterward. Don't wait for the urge to respond to disappear before you do this. It usually won't, not the first few times. The point isn't the absence of the urge. The point is proving to yourself that you can feel the pull toward defending your image and still choose not to follow it over and over until it stops feeling like restraint and starts feeling like who you are. Now here's the paradox. The thing I promised you back at the beginning of this video. Almost everyone believes the sharpest, fastest, most cutting comeback is the ultimate power move. It's not. It's the opposite. The moment you fire back with a clever line, you've done something you didn't intend to do. You've confirmed their comment landed hard enough that you needed a weapon to answer it. A perfect comeback still requires the other person's insult to have worked on you first. That's the trap. That's why it backfires. You can win the exchange and still lose the thing that actually matters because everyone watching, including you, now understands that this got to you enough to fight back. The 5 responses you just learned don't have that problem, and here's the paradox at the center of all of them. The less you visibly try to win, the more unreachable you become. Silence doesn't confirm the hit landed. A calm question doesn't confirm it landed. Genuine agreement doesn't confirm it landed. Curiosity doesn't confirm it landed. Walking away doesn't confirm it landed. Every single one of these responses denies the other person the one thing their comment was actually fishing for, which was never really about being right. It was about getting a reaction, and you're the only person alive who gets to decide whether they get one. This is the part nobody tells you about strengths. It's not loud. It's not the mic drop. It's the almost boring, unglamorous discipline of staying regulated when everyone around you expects you to spiral and doing it so consistently that eventually people stop testing you at all because there's simply nothing to provoke. You've probably assumed they're just naturally thick-skinned, built differently, immune to the same comments that get under your skin. They're not. Almost nobody is born like that. What they've actually done, usually without ever putting a name to it, is stop supplying the reaction that these comments are fishing for. That's a skill, not a personality trait, and skills can be built by anyone willing to practice them past the point of discomfort. And here's the part that makes this genuinely paradoxical rather than just clever advice. Trying to look unbothered doesn't work. If you're performing calm for an audience, you're still playing the same game as the person who fires back with a clapback. You're still managing your image, still hoping the room notices how composed you are. The real version of this only works when it stops being a performance and becomes an actual internal shift, when the comment genuinely doesn't cost you much anymore, instead of you just hiding that it does. That's the difference between looking strong and being unreachable. One requires an audience. The other doesn't need anyone watching at all. So picture this version of you 6 months from now. You're in the same rooms with the same difficult people, but something has shifted. Someone makes a comment clearly meant to knock you off balance. You feel it land because you're human, but it doesn't travel any further than that. You don't rehearse comebacks in the shower anymore. You don't lie awake at midnight replaying conversations, drafting perfect responses you'll never send. You walk into rooms without preloading a defense because you no longer need one. When someone tries the old tricks, the backhanded comment, the public dick, the passive-aggressive jab, you feel almost nothing, not because you've gone numb, but because your sense of yourself no longer depends on their approval of it. People who used to test you stop bothering, not because you got meaner, but because you got quieter, and quiet, it turns out, is much harder to fight than loud. Picture the actual morning. Someone at work sends a passive-aggressive email, CCs your manager, clearly hoping to put you on the back foot before your first coffee is even finished. All you would have felt your stomach drop, would have started drafting a defensive reply before finishing the first sentence. You reads it once, feels the small flicker of irritation, and closes the tab. You answer 3 hours later, 2 lines. Completely professional, completely unbothered, and somehow that's more unsettling to them than any argument would have been. Picture the evening. Someone brings up an old mistake at dinner, the kind of comment that used to wreck your whole night. You just nod, say yeah that happened, and keep eating. Nobody at the table can quite figure out why it didn't land the way it used to. You can't fully explain it either, you just notice quietly that it doesn't cost you anything anymore. The chaos doesn't disappear, people will still be rude. Family gatherings will still have that one comment. Group chats will still have that one person. Meetings will still have someone trying to take credit for your work. None of that goes away, and this video was never gonna promise you that it would. What changes is you. The comments stop being emergencies. They become whether something that happens around you, not something that happens to you. You still notice the rain, you just stop rearranging your whole day around it. Here's your challenge, and I want you to actually do this, not just nod along. For the next 7 days, every single time someone says something designed to get under your skin, use one of these 5 responses instead of your old default.